into three parts, whereby we are looking at the issues regarding the member status, as Grand Secretary has mentioned earlier, but we're looking at the generation and collection of annual dues, and we'll also take you through some of the changes that we've made in terms of giving you access as Provincial Grand Lodge to the information that's held for daughter lodges within your jurisdiction. So the first thing to look at then is the member status, and we'll recap exactly where we are at the moment, just for those of you that maybe are not completely au fait with the database and how it actually works and how it looks. So when a Lodge Secretary logs in to the database, he can access the member data that's held for his lodge via the Secretary's page. And effectively that gives him a list of the office bearers of the lodge at the top, followed by what looks very much like a spreadsheet type arrangement, whereby he has a list of all the lodge members, their member status and personal details. There is an option at the right hand side of that page for the Secretary then to edit a brother's details. And that's where you would then control a member status. So when you log into an individual member's record, you will effectively see their member status, which effectively is a tick box, check box underneath their name, as you can see from mine here. So effectively what we have then is two options. A member is either a qualified member or he's not at the moment currently. And as Grand Secretary has mentioned, that doesn't reflect the constitutional laws in their current form. So if that checkbox is on and it's ticked, the member's a qualified member. If it's not, then the member then becomes an inactive member. And if we then look then at inactive, it's not a term that we use within the constitutional laws, and it leads to all manner of confusion with regards to how we classify progressing candidates as they go through their 3 degrees as well as life members. And it's a conversation I've had with many lodge secretaries over the past year, whereby naturally if you've got a new entrant coming through and they're going through their degrees, that this chap might attend every meeting that he's entitled to attend as he goes through his degrees. So therefore it doesn't feel right to mark him as being an inactive member, because he attends whenever he has the opportunity to. But by the same token, in the eyes of Law 125, he's not a qualified member because he hasn't completed his 3rd degree. And likewise, it's the same with life members. As we're aware, a member who's a qualified member is what generates an annual fee. But the concept of a non-attending life member was introduced a few years ago, which then allowed daughter lodges to effectively stop paying for members who had taken out life membership previously but were no longer attending the lodge for one reason or another. So we intend to change that moving forward, and in a very short period of time, as soon as we get full sign-off from the database developers, that checkbox within the member record will change. It will change to a drop-down box, and the drop-down box will have 3 options. Qualified member, self-explanatory. A non-qualified member. Now, a non-qualified member would capture 2 categories of brethren. The progressing candidates, as we've spoken about, who have yet to be raised to the 3rd degree, and will also qualify all non-test fee paying brethren. So someone who has been a qualified member but suddenly stops paying their test fee to the lodge for what reason or another, and as soon as they don't pay for that current year, they become a non-qualified member. They lose the rights of qualified membership. And then we will come on to the 3rd category, which is defaulting member. As per Law 126, when a brother's in arrear of his annual contribution for a period of 24 months, he shall be deemed to be a defaulting member. So we think that effectively now that gives us a much better range of options to categorise our members into, and it's completely in line with the constitutional laws. And effectively it's going to look something like this, whereby instead of a checkbox, you will have a drop-down box to select the membership option. We then come to life members, and how do these changes affect life members? So a life member should always be treated as a qualified member, but in the current system, if you have them checked as a qualified member, it would generate an annual fee for him. But as I've already mentioned, Law 284 states that a brother who is a life member of a lodge but hasn't attended any meeting of the lodge during its 2 financial years may be treated as a non-attending life member, and therefore the lodge is no longer liable to continue to pay a capitation fee for that brother. So any member who is currently listed as a life member will then have a non-attending life member checkbox added to his member record, along with a date field to record the last date of attending the lodge. And that's a crucial bit. So when you are communicating this out to daughter lodges, as we will be as well, that's something that if a lodge secretary wants to take a member and mark him as a non-attending life member, that's the field that needs to be filled in. Otherwise, it won't trigger on the back end on the database. We then come to the changes that effectively we're going to make on lodge annual dues. So as you see, and as we've seen for the past 2 years, lodge annual dues are generated automatically on the system based on a member status for qualified members. So if a member is marked as being a qualified member on the date that we push the button to generate the annual fees for the year, a capitation fee will be generated and added to that member's record, and effectively will then sit on the lodge fees page within the database. And in line with the Constitution and laws, no annual dues will then be generated for non-qualified members who have still to complete their 3rd degree, any newly qualified members within the same Masonic year, or any new affiliations within the same year, all as per Law 125. And that there seems to be a bit of confusion out there amongst daughter lodges, where some lodges are of the opinion that there's a 12-month grace period from the time that a brother completes his 3rd degree before he has to pay a test fee. But actually, when you read the Constitution and laws, that's not the case. It states under Law 125 that he's not liable to pay an annual contribution in the year in which he becomes a Master Mason. So it's not for 12 months from that point forward, it's within that same Masonic year. And it's the same with affiliations. And that's a message that we'll be communicating to daughter lodges with your help. And again, under the terms of Law 126, as we've previously discussed, a period of 24 months must elapse before a previously qualified member can be deemed a defaulting member. And during this period, the lodge is liable to pay an annual capitation fee for these members. I know we currently have an amnesty in place up until February of next year, whereby any defaulting member can come back to the lodge and only pay the current year's annual capitation fee or the current year's test fee to the lodge in question, and he will then be deemed to be in good standing. So that there is a change there as far as that's concerned, whereas previously, under normal circumstances, a brother would, as per Law 126, would be expected to pay the current year plus the previous 2 years. So what then happens is that when a brother pays 3 years to bring himself back into good standing, the lodge is repaid the 2 years previously that they've paid when he fell out of test, and then the current year, which they then pass through to Grand Lodge at that point. So what we're doing with the database now is reflecting the situation that has always been in place within the Constitution and laws. And in order to allow us to do that, a date field will be added to each member record, and if a lodge secretary wants to change a member status from qualified to non-qualified, he will be expected to confirm the date that the brother last paid a test fee to the lodge. And if then that date falls within that 2-year period, he would still be due a capitation fee for this year, but as soon as it ticks over that 24-month period, the system would update him to be a defaulting member, and no annual fee would be either generated by the system or liable to be paid by the daughter lodge. And the final big change that we're making at the moment is to give Provincial Grand Secretaries, Provincial Grand Treasurers, Provincial Grand Masters access to the database. And this is currently in a beta format, so this is not the final look of this system, but we feel it's vitally important when we're putting in an update to the system to give you this functionality. So you guys will now have access to all of the lodges within the province to allow you to facilitate the inspection of the digital records as well as the paper records, as Grand Secretary has already mentioned earlier on. And the current layout of that page on the website is copied directly from a lodge login, from a Secretary's login. A lot of it is completely redundant in your role as Provincial Grand Secretary or Provincial Grand Master, but what it does do is it will allow you to familiarise yourself, if you haven't had access to this system before, familiarise yourself with the layout of the system, the information that's on there, in order to allow you to better support your daughter lodges within your province. And the final point on that, to avoid duplication and to maintain data integrity, if as you're going through a books inspection you realise that there is some variance or incomplete records or amendments or adjustments that need to be made, you know, that amendment should be completed by the Lodge Secretary only or his nominated representative, and I think that's vital. One of the things that we've came across over the past year is a number of secretaries who don't feel comfortable with this system. So what they have done is they've seconded someone else within the lodge to act as a digital secretary or an assistant secretary, and effectively to take on the electronic record keeping, which I don't think anyone has an issue with at all. So, you know, that's the person that should be doing the majority of the updates. We here in Freemasons Hall are happy to support, and our phones are always on. But we are hoping that effectively the secretaries will do those updates and not Provincial Grand Secretaries. The job is to facilitate it and effectively to get them to manage their own database. So how it's going to look, so as I mentioned earlier, you'll see that the look is very similar to that of a Lodge Secretary's login, and there's a lot of information there which is completely not relevant to your role as Provincial Grand Secretary. At that point, the only option that you're looking for is the one that's circled in red, which is download provincial member list. And what you will do with that is you'll click on that button, and it will then download a list of members for each lodge, and as you'll see down the bottom, it's tabulated. So there is a tab for each lodge within the province. It gives a note on the top of the fees paid and a note of the fees outstanding for each lodge, for that lodge, and a list of all of the members and whether they're qualified members, non-qualified or defaulted members, their dates of their degrees, the mother lodge number if they're a life member, etc. What we're also hoping to see when this finally does go live is that your very first tab within that Excel spreadsheet is going to be an overview for the full province. So what that will mean is that when you log in, you will see every lodge in the province and how much they've paid and how much is still outstanding, to give you a very, very quick ready reckoner, effectively, to see how the provincial Grand Lodge is performing in terms of collection of the fees on behalf of Grand Lodge for the daughter lodges in question. What I'll do now is I'm going to stop sharing this screen, and I'm going to hand over to Willie, who will take you through a live demo of how that's actually going to work.
Evening, brethren. What I intend to do now is share my screen and show you how that looks in practice, as Scott says. Just bear with me. So the first thing we'll do is we will go to Grand Lodge website. Can everybody see that? Not hearing anybody. Everybody's on mute. Sorry.
Yes, we can hear.
Right. Thank you. And we go to the members section, which is this little button up at the top, or all the way down to the bottom. We have another option where you can go in through there. So we'll click that and we come to this login screen here. So what we've done is we've effectively given all the PGMs a login to be able to access this particular part of the website, which as Scott has alluded to is the part that the secretaries already enjoy. For this exercise, I'm going to use Aberdeen West. Gordon, we're just going to use yours at the moment just to demonstrate a login. If you have any questions, gentlemen, if you could keep them till the end of this part of the presentation, we'll be doing a Q&A later on. I've also done a PowerPoint of all of this procedure step by step, which will be available to you all post the meeting. So we'll click on logging in, and then we will populate that. And as I say, in this instance, I'm going to use Aberdeenshire West. Now, when you're allocated these logins, gentlemen, you will be able to change that password. We'll not know that password. So in the event that you've forgotten that password, you'd call in to us here at Grand Lodge and we can reset it for you. So as Scott's already alluded to, this is what the secretaries come into. Unfortunately, at the moment, we'd actually like a page tailored perfectly for yourselves. But as Willie said earlier, this is what we have. We have two means of getting to that download button that Scott was alluding to, which is the secretary's page link here or here. The other links, we'd ask that you don't use them at all. That's for your lodge secretaries. These links here, you can feel free to use those. That's if you're needing any forms, etc., downloaded, want to go to the Grand Lodge shop, etc. So I'll click this one here and we'll get into the secretary's page. Now, all of this, as Scott has said, that would be populated for a lodge secretary, but in this instance, because you're not lodge secretaries, it's blank, as is this information here. So we ask that we, for the time being, you ignore all of that information, and that the only button that you need to concentrate on is this download provincial membership list. Right, everybody see that okay? So Scott has said, well, the first tab will have an overall view of the fees situation within the province. This particular sheet doesn't actually have the fees part in. That's in the example Scott showed earlier, and that example is in the PowerPoint. This is as it sits currently, but we've got changes being made which will be reflected within the coming days. And that's essentially it, gentlemen. Once you've done whatever it is you need to do within there, use that spreadsheet during your inspection and compare and contrast, as Willie said, using this as your digital reference. Right, to get on to the PowerPoint, this is basically just what we've done now. We've went to the membership section. I've put the link into Grand Lodge website. We've clicked into the members login. We've entered a username and password. If at any time you have any queries about the information or you need to reset that password, if you use this email address here, and we can get that sorted out for you. Once you've entered your details, log in. Again, it's the two links to the secretary's page. Another warning here that we don't want you using any of the other links. And the button that you're interested in, which is to download the provincial member list. and then that'll download that in Excel format. You have the option to save it. You have the option to view it. If you're using a Mac, then use numbers and it'll open it up just the same. And as Scott pointed out earlier, this is the sort of data that you will get once the changes have been made, with the exception that you'll also have a cover-all for the whole province as the first tab. So you've got your fees section, your members section, and then all the different daughter lodges.
Can I ask a question? Stuart McCall, I'm here, Sir Provincial Secretary. Maybe a silly, obvious question. You see the tabs for the individual lodges. Is that got a functionality to print them out? Because, you know, in Ayrshire we've got 44 lodges, and I would want to furnish the commissioned office bearer who's doing the particular visitation with a copy of that information when he's going out to do the visitation. So can you confirm it can be printed out on a page-by-page basis, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Can I, Grant Kavanagh from Edinburgh here. I've got 2 or 3 questions, if you don't mind. You mentioned that when a test fee paying member stops paying their test fee, the Lodge Secretary will enter a date of the date the last paid their test fee. But for a period of 2 years, the Lodge will still have to pay the capitation fee for that member. After the 2-year period, if they're still not paying their test fees, did I hear you right and say that the 2 years that have previously been paid will be refunded back to the Lodge?
So when the amnesty is over, if a defaulted member after the amnesty period was to look to return to the Lodge, they would be expected to pay 3 years fees as per Law 126. Grand Lodge at that point would only expect one of those 3 years to be paid to Grand Lodge. So the Lodge would effectively keep those other 2 years, which repays them for the 2 years that they paid at the point that the brother fell out of test.
Because I know a lot of the secretaries I'm aware of, as soon as a brother doesn't pay their test fee, they don't pay a capitation fee in respect of that brother. But you're now saying that the Lodge is going to have to pay for 2 years until he becomes a defaulting member. Now, my understanding of the capitation fees is that they're payable for every qualified member of the Lodge, but as soon as you've not paid a test fee, you're no longer a qualified member of the Lodge.
Yeah, you're right, Grant. They're no longer a qualified member of the Lodge, but the Constitution and laws provides that the Lodge still pays for 2 years until they're a defaulting member. Once they're a defaulting member, there's no fee due to Grand Lodge.
I'm not sure that's what the con laws actually says, because it just says in respect of every qualified member.
No, you're right. It's not best written is probably the best way of putting it, and it's not consistent across Scotland in the way that it's managed. Some provinces, quite obviously, yours doesn't do it, but others do. And to be consistent, the way we'd look at it is our interpretation of the Constitution and laws, and it might be clarified when we eventually get the latest draft sorted out, would be that the member, until they become defaulting after 24 months, there's still a test fee due to Grand Lodge.
Right. And I'm happy to accept that, but what do we do if we get a situation where a Lodge secretary says, well, as per how the Constitution and laws are currently written, we're not liable for a capitation fee for this guy that's not paid a test fee?
Well, I can be if you want to use the terminology, I can be the determining brother for that one, and I can say that they might be poorly written, but that's the way it is.
Right. Okay, that's fine. Do you know when we'll be likely to get the login details for this, or?
Willie?
Yeah, I've got the login details ready now, Grant. And you'll need to forgive me, but the only province that is not working is Edinburgh. We have reported it back to CSAM, who are actually currently working on solving that issue. But yeah, the only one that's not working is yourselves.
Okay. And I've just got one very final quick question. Obviously, the biggest value of the database is the data that's contained within it. Is there any thoughts for the future of, we record when someone is initiated, passed, raised, marked and affiliated. One glaring thing that's missing is if they're an installed master, because I think that could be a valuable piece of information for the future.
That is recorded, Grant. So when there is a section within the database, which is a member's office, and as soon as a member is installed and is then shown on the database as being an installed master, that information is held there on that brother's record till the end of time.
We have quite a bit of information that's not readily available to secretaries or to yourselves, Grant, behind the scenes, if you like, that as Scott's alluding to there, we have the facility where we do record members' office titles. We've also got a fair bit on the districts and proxies and all of that sort of stuff on this database. So there is a plethora of other information that's held here. And as and when a request comes in for parts of that, it'll be approved or otherwise by the Grand Secretary for release.
It just, the past masters thing could be a useful recruitment tool for the provinces, because they could do a mail shot, if you like, to all their past masters and encourage them to take up membership of the province.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'd appreciate, Grant, if you could write that in, and then I'll certainly get that. I know it's recorded here, but we can put that as an action point going forward.
Okay, no worries. That's me. Thank you.
Dave.
Grand Secretary, my provincial Grand Secretary he's had a lot of trouble with he was checking in and finding that there's lots of omissions on this system we've got. This new system, we hope, will update it and possibly cut that out. But why is this new system now has my address still been sent to the past provincial Grand Master 2.5 years since I was installed in the chair? I've spoken in Grand Lodge to one of the members there, and he says, oh, that'll be sorted, that'll be sorted. I've spoken to the girls on the phone, that'll be sorted, that'll be sorted. They're still sending my mail to the past provincial Grand Master.
No,
is there any guarantee that this new system, that when everything, the data is put into it, is it going to be recorded in the proper places?
I'll tell you, you've hit upon an issue, because we've got about half a dozen databases in this place, and none of them are linked, and none of them speak to each other. And I feel your pain, because I got my proxy membership sent to my old address as well, and I'm just round the corner from where they're posting them. So I know what you're talking about. The only thing we can put in place, and part of the improvement plan for here is IT in general, and the various databases that we hold have got to be combined, and however that's going to be, Dave. The short answer is when new information comes in, such as a change of address or a change of role and responsibility, then it's down to, we've got a system of sorts in place here that whoever gets the phone call changes their area of responsibility, and it's circulated to the rest of them so that they can all be updated. It's not acceptable, absolutely, in this day and age, but it is what it is. And it's the point you make there will definitely be dealt with this evening, and sorted out. So whoever you spoke to, I take it is on here tonight. We just make sure they've got the details and we do it. But I'm not going to defend the indefensible, and I'm not here to do that. What we are going to try and do is fix it. But it's not a wave of a magic wand, and it's not going to happen tomorrow. What you're seeing, even the changes we're making to this database to get the right terminology in place, and accurately reflect the constitution and laws has taken us 12 months to get down to this stage. So it's in place for the start of the new season almost. And even now, we've missed the boat slightly for the start of the new season. So, you know, believe you me, it ain't perfect, right? And I know that. And this database, we might not have it this time next year. It might be, we'll have a database, but it might be something else that actually makes the whole system work. But right now, it isn't acceptable. I agree with you entirely. But whoever you spoke to, if we can take note of that and make sure Dave Crilly's details are correct.
Thank you, Grand Secretary. I was rested and assured with the young lady I spoke to. She says, I'll make sure that gets updated. And I realise I'm all for change and anything that can update this system because it saves secretaries. So I remember when I was secretary filling in the old green forms and whatnot. Anything else that, you know, makes it easier. But I look forward to change and getting it right.
I just want to come in there, if I might, Grand Secretary. Just to re-emphasise, Dave, this isn't a new system. This is the legacy system that we have. We're making changes to it to reflect constitution and laws, as the Grand Secretary said. And he's quite right in regards to depending on who you speak to here, as to whether all the databases actually get updated or not. That's the difficulty we have. So I take your point. I'll contact you directly post this meeting and we'll get that sorted out, and I'll take that responsibility. But this is also an opportunity for yourselves that when you carry out these inspections, the data is only as good as the data that we get. So secretaries have a huge role in getting that data correct. We've been on their case now for a very, very long time to try and get that so, and we're still having to sort of press those issues. So it's important that secretaries play a role in keeping the data up to date. But it's also important that if you do, and I know you have in your instance, Dave, identified that it's wrong, notify us here so that we can. And as Willie says, we cannot defend, depending on who obviously gets the phone call, as to whether that's updated right across the system. It's a very, some of the databases that we have are very, very, very dated, nearly as old as myself, and we're trying to rectify that. As the Grand Secretary says, we are looking to make this better for you in any way we can. This next update that's coming is going to address a number of the concerns that we've had over the years. But as far as the data goes, we have what we have, and it will take time to get it right.
Can I just say something
we
there,
would ask for patience.
2 seconds.
Yeah.
Just a point, picking up on what Willie was saying there, and Dave's mentioned, you are getting access to the lodge members' email addresses, and I make a point that if we get that sorted, then it makes communication an awful lot easier. I dip sampled one of the lodges today with 46 members, 45, 46 members, and only 6 had email addresses attributed to them, and I know for a fact one of them was wrong out of the 6 that actually had them. So it's getting, when I say, you know, we're checking the digital records, it's as basic as, can you update the email addresses so we can send stuff to people, and you know, all this kind of business. So there is a bit of work needing done. We'll certainly be getting the sleeves rolled up on this side of the database, but it's when we're inspecting the records, it's basics such as that, just to make sure that when it's right and when it's actually put in there. Don't get me wrong. People are not obliged to put their email addresses in, but you know, 6 out of 46 members, I don't think they've all said no thanks, you know.
And just on that, I'm our lodge secretary, and what I've done for us, people change providers, so end up changing email addresses. We've got generic email addresses providers out there like Microsoft Outlook or Gmail, etc. So to encourage secretaries to actually use an email address or create one that reflects their lodge, and then that can be handed over should they change. So for example, in my lodge, it's just secretary1175 at outlook.com. and I can hand that straight over to any successor, whatever, without any problems of them not having historic emails, etc. So it keeps it nice and neat. And if everybody was to use the same format, it'd be a lot easier to record as well when we're updating databases. So it's just an idea there as well as for something to push out where we try to use a generic type email address from one of the providers.
Okay, I think there's a couple of guys got their hands up, Willie.
Right. Bob.
Good evening, brethren. Just a couple of wee points there. Just in the first one on what you said about email addresses. Probably most lodges have their own domain name, as we do at Lodge Green at Conning number 12. And with that, you can then generate email addresses like Right Worshipful Master, Webmaster.
Yep.
So that's how I would approach it from my end. So, but sorry, my main point was back to the login, provincial login. Would it not be easier or better, or have I missed something, so that when provincial brethren are logging in, that they can only see the secretary's page, rather than giving them 4 or 5 options and saying don't touch this bit, because as sure as eggs is eggs. I know, because I've done a lot of database stuff in the past, something will happen and they'll screw it up. And as you say, lodge secretaries should be the ones that can change, and nobody else should be able to do that unless they've got a representative. So probably provincial won't be able to change anything in this anyway. It'll just be a picture of the up-to-date data that the lodge secretaries have put in.
No, you're absolutely right, Bob. We noted that. Unfortunately, that was a change that was done earlier that we didn't have any influence on, and it was one of the first criticisms we've picked up. So absolutely, going forward, when we put the next changes in, you will get a tailored page specifically to your requirement. You're right. We don't want you seeing things you shouldn't see, or buttons that you can press by accident, etc. So it's a point well made, and it is noted. It is something we've already picked up.
I think it's maybe worth adding, though, Bob, that actually the links that Willie have suggested that we don't touch, the reason, or part of the reason why we've suggested not to touch them, is actually because there's nothing behind them. So there is nothing actually for you to see, or nothing for you to mess up. All we're trying to do is to stop the phone calls coming, which would be, I've clicked on this and I can't see anything. What's wrong? Is it broken? So it's mainly just a case of saying, don't bother clicking it, because there's actually nothing there.
Thank you.
Andy.
Right, sorry. Provincial Grand Treasurer for Orkney and Zetland, just no long started. A quick question about the test fees field that you spoke about. Is that field going to be there permanently for lodge secretaries or treasurers, whoever it deals with, to update on an ongoing basis? Or should it only appear at non-qualified or whatever, or is it going to be there as a permanent field?
Yes, so the field is there as a permanent field, and every time a secretary pays an annual capitation fee on behalf of a member, that field will then update to the current year. So effectively, any capitation fees that are paid for 2022, the field will then automatically update and show 2022 as the year that the last test fee was paid.
Oh, it's the last test fee paid?
Yeah. So it's the last capitation fee paid to Grand Lodge, but technically that's also the last time that the brother would have paid a test fee. That the two are one and the same.
Okay, so it's not the exact date that they paid?
No, it's not the exact date. When you're marking a brother or changing a brother from qualified to non-qualified, you would put in the date that the last test fee was paid. But then moving forward, it'll update to the date that the lodge secretary then pays the capitation fee. The idea behind it is that you only need a secretary to put that date in the event that a brother stops paying his test fees.
Okay, no.
Donald,
Good evening. Just a quick question on a similar subject. The non-attending life members, after 2 years of a non-attending, you would actually switch into a non-attending. Is there a date field in there to be input?
Yes. So you would effectively at that point be putting in the date that the brother last attended the lodge.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Jim,
Jim McMillan, I'm the Assistant Secretary of Argyll and Niles, but I'm also a Secretary of Inverary number 50. It's because of the amnesty, we've had a couple of guys that are coming back this year and they've never been on the database, but they've obviously had their 3 degrees, etc., etc. How does a Secretary feed that information back into the database?
Quite simple.
There used to be a page, a missing members page, and we'd email it to Grand Lodge. Is that still the same?
So you can do it that way, or there is actually an add member function.
Is there?
A lodge secretary sees now. What I would say, the crucial part of that piece of functionality, when a secretary has input the details of the returning member, there is a box down at the bottom which says tick here, and I'll paraphrase because I don't have it in front of me at the moment. It says tick here if initiation fee has already been paid to Grand Lodge. So if you have a brother that's returning and his initiation fee has been paid and he's been through his 3 degrees, we need to get over to lodge secretaries that they need to tick that box. If they don't tick the box, the system will generate an initiation fee for them. And it will also not then allow them to perform any further edits on that brother until us in the finance department have cleared a flag on the back end to ensure that the initiation fee actually is paid.
Right.
But if that box is ticked, that's all bypassed. The brother gets added to the database and the secretary can amend, change his status, do whatever he wants at that point.
That's great, Scott. That's very helpful. Thank you.
right, that's all the hands I had up. Has anybody else got any questions? No.
Can I just throw in there what Scott said? What it actually says on the individual database is tick if member has already paid initiate or affiliate fee to Grand Lodge. I just had a quick look.
Yeah. So has anybody got any thoughts on how things are developing, or you know, maybe not specific questions, but any thoughts in general about this, or problems, or the thought, you know, about
Wally, will we get a download of this or a PowerPoint presentation or anything like that? Like,
yeah, the boys have done a PowerPoint that will be circulated, Davey, and you know, bottom line as well is we're here to help as well. You know, there's a lot. You know, we're going to be doing 4 kind of similar things for the daughter lodge secretaries over the next 2 or 3 weeks. Well, we'll start off with 4 and see how many more we need to do. So we're going to get the word out. The main changes here, if people are comfortable using the database, the main changes are terminology. Yeah, and actually capturing what we should be, how we should be referring to our membership, either qualified, non-qualified, etc., etc., and doing away with all this stuff about, you know, attending or whatever else we had in place that's developed over the years. So that's the main thrust of this.
I think that's where everybody's getting confused as in to the terminology. Like, you know, it's you know, qualified, non-qualified. There's blah 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 blah. Aye. If we can get that sorted out and put down to sort of 3 categories, I think we'll be sound then. Like.
Absolutely, and it came to a head through you know, through the lockdown period where we still had we still went through the nomination process for provincial Grand Masters, and every qualified member of the lodge is entitled to their view or their vote for that process. And that's where it came to a head. You didn't actually, your foot doesn't have to cross the door of the lodge to be a qualified member. And that's where we're getting confusing with this database. We had attending members, and I can't remember the rest of them now, but it was all. and it came down to the thing: if you're a qualified member, you've paid your test fees, you're in good standing, and you're entitled to the benefits of qualified membership. And on that occasion, it was you had a say in who the next provincial Grand Master was going to be. And we had guys down living in the south of England who hadn't been to their lodge in years, but still paid their dues and were qualified members. So all this stuff about attending and active and all this kind of nonsense is a thing of the past.
Thanks very much for that, Willie. You take care. Look after yourself.
Same yourself. Well, listen, if there's no more questions, chaps, you know, you've got the contact details for myself, Willie in the IT department, Scott in the finance, are the two kind of main conduits for this at the moment. Things will develop. We might go through a bit of pain, but we'll come out the other end in a better shape. And as I said to you at the very start, I ain't going to defend the indefensible. There's definitely improvements could be made with what we've got. We've got databases that don't speak to each other. We've got data that needs updated. It's a work in progress, and the next 12 months are going to be pretty challenging for people in Freemasons Hall. But if you can bear with us and go in the knowledge that we are definitely committed to making things better and making things consistent with what Scottish Freemasonry is all about, and in this instance, reflecting the Constitution and laws absolutely accurately, so that nobody's in any misunderstanding about how things operate as far as the craft goes. So if you're comfortable in letting us do that, we'd absolutely look for your support to in turn support the daughter lodges, and particularly the annual inspection of records. Definitely now absolutely has got to include the digital records as well as the normal written records we're all comfortable with looking at. Willie and Scott.
Questions. I think there's another couple of questions.
Oh, aye, good.
Rankin.
Rankin.
Yeah, thanks. Just wondering on the point of book inspections, we've been asked to include individual lodge databases in that book inspection every year. And I'm kind of a wee bit at a loss as to how we can inspect that database and decide whether or not the information in it's accurate without going along involved route checking against the treasurer's books to see who's paid their test fees, etc., etc.
We're giving you as much information as we can, Rankin, and possibly a way to do it is dip sample. You know, when it gets the lodge master and the lodge office bearers, administrative office bearers, have got a responsibility to make sure the books are in order before they get them to the province to then inspect them, you know. So it's a case of dip sampling, and it might be a case of having a look and through your own attendance at lodges, you'll be aware of people's details that should be on. A simple thing, you know, starting off with, let's get all the blooming email addresses sorted out so that they're accurate and actually reflect the people that we should be communicating with for a kickoff. So there's no easy way of doing it, but the way that I've seen it operate very effectively in the past is dip sampling. So you pick half a dozen and just make sure it's consistent. And if it's not, then we dig further. If it's okay, we've got to trust the master and the administrative office bearers, the secretary and the treasurer to do their job as well.
Okay, thanks.
What I would add with that, Rankin, as well, is that on this new download that you have access to, you'll be able to see exactly how much every daughter lodge is paid in terms of annual fees. So if you have a lodge that's paid £231, say, and therefore has reported that about 7 qualified members, but you're looking at their books inspection and you know full well that they're sitting with 55 qualified members, you know then that someone's, not being completely honest with their annual return. So it's that information is now readily at your fingertips.
Jim. You're on mute, Jim.
Yeah, Secretary of Aberdeen City, just a point on the annual inspection. I, as Secretary and Treasurer, sign off the books after inspection if everything is okay. How do we sign off the digital format?
Sorry, Jim, I don't understand. You just
you're saying that we look at the books on their record of attendance, etc., etc., in their own books, in their own meetings, lodge books. But then we come to look at the digital. So it's two different areas we're looking at. At the moment, we just sign off what we've inspected, and so does the treasurer. So
I fully. There's no easy way of doing it. There's no digital stamp, so to speak, to put into the thing. A suggestion would be the entry that you would put into the minute book, presumably having inspected the lodge records, you could also include a line to say and the digital records are all in order, or we've identified this. We recommend you take such and such steps to rectify it. Would be the way to do it. We haven't the technology we've got. We haven't got the digital timestamp on this yet to say that we've been in for a look.
Okay, no problem. It was just a point that it would come up. Yeah,
valid point. It's a valid point.
Grand Secretary, can I ask, is the standard form for annual visitation going to be amended to include this as part of the annual report that comes from the commissioned office bearers?
Aye, there was mentioned one of the standing committees here to have a look at the paperwork that's issued for that purpose and see if we can standardise it, or at least set a minimum, a minimum standard for across the Scottish Constitution. And let's face it, we include overseas in this as well. And it's some provinces have absolutely top-notch paperwork that they use for the inspection process, and others, to be frank, probably don't use very much as a standard for the inspection process. So it's something that the Information and Communication Committee have got and are kicking it about that particular committee at the moment to see if we can come up with a basic standard template for the Scottish Constitution.
Because that would deal with the point raised by the Provincial Grand Secretary from Aberdeen City.
Yeah.
You know, if there was a standardised format and that was a box to be ticked effectively, well, it wouldn't need to be digitised in relation to that, because in the checking of everything else, if that's covered, then the job's done in that particular point.
Aye, no, it's a valid point. And when as I say, that committee is got the action to have a wee look at it. So we'll see what they come up with. But aye, we'll encourage that bit of work.
Andy.
Just a quick follow up on that. The qualified, non-qualified, etc., and the date field, is that all going to be in place before the next set of annual dues is generated in the database for the daughter lodges?
Yeah,
that's the hope.
Yes, okay. Just to make sure it's up to date before that.
Yeah.
Dave.
Hi, Grand Secretary. I was just saying this will be a very productive meeting, and I'm glad I joined it today. And I'll pass this on to my Provincial Grand Secretary, and hopefully he'll pick up on a lot of these things. And I hope there's many more of them. Thank you.
Once a secretary, Dave, always a secretary.
You know it.
But just on that point, Dave, there is a plan for us to do supporting Zoom meetings around this in October. Willie and Scott are making themselves available to do some extra insight into this during October. But again, there'll be other opportunities outside that as well, as and when the demand requires it.
Lovely. I really appreciate that, and I'll pass that on to my Provincial Secretary, and I'm sure he'll be delighted to attend these meetings when he can.
Good. This has been recorded as well, so this will be available for a refresher. Or anybody that wasn't able to come here tonight from the province can dip into this. Willie will make it available in whatever format or platform he's going to put it on.
If you could, Willie, if you can get that somewhere to myself or to my Provincial Secretary, and I'm sure he'll be quite happy to download that and see what he's missed tonight.
Yeah.
It's been very, very informative.
I'll certainly put it up. Probably tomorrow it'll go up, and I'll get the link out to you all.
Thank you for that, Willie. Thanks.
Any other questions? The Grand Secretary, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Aye, if there's no more questions, lads. Just as I said previously, the our intention with this is quite simply, it's simple changes. So a lot of the lodge secretaries are comfortable with the database as was, and it's more terminology that's changed to reflect the constitutional laws, as I said, and the content of the constitutional laws as well. So hopefully we can smoothly introduce this latest format of the database. It's unfinished work, and there is more to be done, and it links into the wider IT review and improvements that are required in Freemasons Hall in order to bring it more fully into the 21st century. So it's absolutely work in progress. It's not perfect, it is what it is, but it's better, and it actually reflects the constitution and laws for the Scottish constitution. So from that aspect, I'm quite comfortable we're heading in the right direction, and it will generate other areas of work. It will generate changes to the constitution and laws. It will generate paperwork to support the inspection process. It will generate bits and pieces such as that. That's going to be an offshoot of any kind of change that's been introduced, and this is just one aspect of it. So if you can, bear with us, support the daughter lodges, and we'll get through this phase. Is all I would say, really. And you've got my contact details. You've got the boys' contact details. Any problems at all, get in touch. Any queries you've got, get in touch. Any problems with understanding the canon laws or interpreting them, you're not alone. It's not the easiest book in the world to read and understand. There's different interpretations throughout the Constitution, not far less just throughout Scotland. But we're here to help. So let's get that job done.
Just on a point you made earlier, Grant, we do have these other bits of information. So should you ever find yourselves, any of you, in Grand Lodge, and you want to look at the back end of that just for the information, it might give you a better insight to what it's all about. You're very welcome anytime.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, there's nothing else, chaps. I think we'll call it a night. And
sorry, I've got one bit question on that there. I know the functionality's there for the daughter lodges to put in the office bearers, and that's been the case since the system came in. But what about the historic offices that folk held? Is there any way for that to appear in the system, or is it in the background?
Again, we can provide a list of your lodge members and where those gaps are. If you are willing to fill that in, we can certainly put these changes in for you. So yeah, it can be done.
No, I think Willie, what Andy's saying is, do we hold a retrospective data in respect of offices held by lodge members? Grant's asked about what past masters has there been, or what past masters exist rather. And I think Andy's saying there about previous offices held. Am I right in saying that, Andy?
Yes, because obviously each time it changes, you update the current to the previous to the new one. But I'm speaking go back maybe 10 years, and who was the master and the senior junior warden and that, etc. Is there any way that can be populated?
Right. So what happens at the moment is when we make that change, we make the current incumbent non-active.
Yeah.
So it's still recorded on the system, but as non-active. To be fair, I've never actually tried that query, but I can certainly have a test at pulling that out and seeing if it does that.
It's but it's only certain numbers of office bearers we record.
I know that.
Aye, but it's a valid point you make, and there is some notes that can be made on the system. But likewise, the old fashioned what do you call it, book? Not a petition, but it's a petition book. That should contain a record of the individual's Masonic career, which would include offices and all this kind of stuff. So if the lodge is maintaining that properly, that book should contain that information, far less the digital database.
Mm-hmm.
I would say the digital database is a member's database. That's what that's what it's designed for. It's not designed as a Masonic archive. and some people have misinterpreted that, and some people are, put that out as to use it for that purpose. It's a living members database, more or less, and whether that's good, bad, or indifferent, that's really what we bought all these years ago, and that's what we've been using. The paper records are absolutely still relevant to the Scottish Freemasonry from a historic point of view, and recording, just as you said, Andy, there, recording members' offices throughout their Masonic career. That's the place for that. This database, I won't pretend that it's not designed for that function. Maybe it's been used to an extent for bits and pieces, but it records living members, both in good standing and not in good standing, qualified and not qualified.
Maybe just interject here. I think you hit the nail on the head earlier on when you said it's a living members database. It's not an archive of Masonic progression for individuals. And if we're all being completely honest, the database has had its problems since day one. And I think it would be better to focus on capturing the data that is currently relevant and not get bogged down in trying to overburden the system, trying to keep track of historical information, which should be kept by the Lodge Secretary.
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed, Grant. Yeah.
Bob.
I'm just going to repeat what you said a minute ago, Willie, that I was going to say, like, in 10 years' time, if the database is revised now or not rewritten, but what's going to be available next year is a lot better than what's available last year. It's easy enough to create a historical record in a database table, and the information that has been input office bearers for this year could be quite easily taken so that next year these office bearers are still recorded for this year and for the following years and so on, and it then does become historical data in the future. If we wanted to go back, as you said, Willie, was it Scott? I don't think the secretaries are going to really want to do that, because it's an awful lot of work to go back, even just like having a master's board going back all these years. So I think it's moving in the right direction, and it's looking good. It will be a lot better. I know that just by what we've been talking about tonight. Thanks.
No bother, Bob. Thanks. It will be, but it's if we're going to say if we want an online digital archive, then we're going to have to develop one, because this is not it, guys. This is a members database for for living members, qualified, non-qualified members, and it's some areas have started recording their lodge or their lodge membership details going back some considerable time. It's not designed for that, and it can't replace whatever recording mechanism lodges have for their own historical purposes. It's not designed for that, and we've got to be quite clear about that. And if we do want an online archive, and I've been looking at the situation in Freemasons Hall here, how our records are maintained currently, and if we're going to put that onto a digital footing, then there's steps have got to be taken. So it is what it is, and let's use it as the members database now to manage our current membership as effectively as we can do. And if we develop into other areas over the years to come, then so be it.